Thank you guys for joining me today. My name is Molly Yanis, and I'm the founder and CEO of StrAlign, a strategic decision-making software. And today, we're going to be talking about project prioritization and scenario planning with StrAlign. Just a couple of housekeeping things to get started. I am known as the question queen. Please do not hesitate to go ahead and reach out with a question. You are welcome to do so via chat. You're welcome to raise your hand. You're welcome to just interrupt me when I take a breath. And then I'm going to ask Barb from my team to go ahead and monitor our chat as we go ahead and go along. For today, we're going to start off framing up the problem. We're going to talk at a very high level about StrAlign and kind of what's available now, and then we're going to actually spend a vast majority of our time in the tool. And again, any questions that you have as we go along, please don't hesitate. All right, again, Molly Yanis with StrAlign. So the problem that we're here to talk about today is project prioritization and how scenario planning works with StrAlign. But let's take a step back and think about why we need to prioritize projects and why we need to look at multiple different scenarios when we're making plans. So far too many projects fail. They fail for a variety of reasons, but one of them is they're just not delivering the outcome, the value, the expected return for the investment. So this can mean it's wasted time and resources. It can mean frustration. It can mean missed opportunities because you're working on one project when another project would have actually been better. And it can mean churn as we stop and start and move and all of these different things without having a clear understanding and view of where we're headed, why we're going there, and why we're working on that project. So there's a lot of different resources on this. I always talk about Google, but if you Google, right, project prioritization, scenario planning, these are things that are very frustrating. And as we head towards the end of the year, I know it's crazy. We're just starting out in Q2 in this time, but we're already thinking about what the next quarter looks like and what the next year looks like. Strategic alignment and portfolio management is still one of the top issues that organizations say they have when they're looking to prioritize and pick which projects are really going to provide the most value. We oftentimes see this, whether you want to call it a siloed approach or what, you have this concept of your visionaries, your leadership team, your decision makers, whatever that looks like for your organization, whether you're a small nonprofit all the way up to a Fortune 100. You have a decision making and a leadership team that has a strategic vision. Whether or not it's articulated and shared and transparent and inclusive, that's an open question, and there's some other things we can dig in at a later time, but there is some sort of strategic plan view of where we're going. Oftentimes, it's a longer term view. We like to see those at least a year to 3 years out with that future facing vision. You also have on your team, again, regardless of whether you're a small startup or a much larger growing enterprise, you have people that are on the floor, the people that are actually executing on tasks. For small organizations, those people might be decision makers as well as the people that are doing the tasks. For larger organization, there might be a more formal dichotomy there. But you have people that are contributing their ideas, areas that they think to improve, and they're actually executing on these projects, executing on these initiatives, executing on these strategies. And not having that visibility of the strategy and why some projects may become super high important and need to be executed on immediately versus, hey, this was a priority and now it's taking a back seat. It can be very frustrating, and it can be very, honestly, there can be a lack of buy-in and adoption because the feel is that what they're doing doesn't really provide the most value for the organization. So when we think about the way things are, we often talk about project prioritization in the shorter term, as in we're making decisive decisions about which projects are in and which projects are out. And I love something Jason had said just a few weeks ago, which is saying no. Having projects have an off-ramp saying, you know what, this is not what we're pursuing is such a huge challenge for so many organizations that love all of the ideas, but aren't able to say, you know what, this is not the idea that we're pursuing right now, and that can really free up those resources for the ones that do need that focus. Too often, ideas are in people's heads. Ideas are in the siloed teams that are closest to it, but there's not a lot of trust that when an idea gets said, that it's actually going to make it, that it's actually going to get fully evaluated or understood. And on the opposite side of things, sometimes the intake process, the ability to collect the idea, is actually so strenuous and so frustrating and so many steps that people actually don't want to share the idea because it's extra work and they would rather just stay focused on the day-to-day and the way things are now versus opening themselves up to that. Too often when we prioritize projects, it has to do with the advocates and the sponsors and whether there's budget and not enough focus on whether they're aligned with the strategic goals. And the team oftentimes feels like they don't have a voice in that project prioritization. Meanwhile, in the hopefully longer term, there is goal tracking, there is strategic planning. Again, different organizations have different maturity here, but the concept is that whether it's a board, whether it's a steering committee, whether it's the executive leadership team, C-suite, there's a review of those strategic goals. We're refreshing, making sure that those are still clear and that they are being announced and or shared with the team. Oftentimes this looks like a slide in an all hands meeting. Maybe you have, those values, mission, etc. up there. But oftentimes we get so distracted by those short-term, immediate. If you guys are familiar with the Eisenhower methodology, I mean, this is great here, right? So the immediate, the short-term things, daily operations takes priority, definitely cash flow and things like that. Unfortunately, the strategic goals kind of live in this silo. They're put up on a pedestal and they don't live and breathe and are part of decision making every day. And so this project prioritization is this constant cycle. The goal tracking and strategic planning needs to be able to have a constant cycle, which is, we set goals, we actually track and measure them. We have ideas, we prioritize our ideas, and we actually execute on our ideas, right? And so there's doers and there's the visionaries. And what we're looking to do is provide with StrAlign the ability for more interaction and more visibility between the strategic and the organizational goals and the project prioritization process. So if I think about this, really we're looking to bridge that gap between the strategic goals, strategic planning, the idea management, so finding the right ideas, evaluating the ideas, getting votes and input on the ideas, and then actually executing on that, bringing it all together and providing clear prioritization of these are the projects, these are the initiatives we're working on because these are our goal focuses and these are the best of all of the ideas that we have. So when I think about the solution and we designed StrAlign, really we were looking to, again, bridge that gap between this strategy, which can too often be this black box, this meeting, this slide that's used, and the planning and delivery, the project management, the portfolio management, execution part of it, and really kind of play that space where we are helping drive decisions based on data. We're helping prioritize projects based on the goals. We're helping get additional buy-in from your team because they understand the process. They understood that their input matters. So when I think about how StrAlign works, I think about the different data components that all get into this. So the team members, your subject matter experts, your people have ideas. They are innovative. They have the challenges, they experience them, and they know what your clients need. So they need to provide their input and they need to have a place that's user-friendly, that is reasonable, that is accessible to them to share those ideas, but not just share them and put them on a list. Feel that they're heard, feel that they're part of it and that they really have, have visibility and have the potential for implementation. Additionally, having that visibility of what the strategic goals are, not just in an announcement way, not just in putting that information out there, but in a way that can be interacted with, felt, and really drive the organization to hit those goals. So StrAlign comes in and helps us provide that dynamic prioritization, that intersectional view of how priorities shift in an organization. Because the truth is, priorities change. Change is normal. Change is actually how it typically works. So when we design processes to have, this is our set of goals and this is our set of projects, we eliminate so many opportunities and we shoot ourselves in the foot. So with that being said, does anyone have questions about why we're here today and why we're going to be looking at StrAlign at this point? Has everyone felt that experience of, we have good ideas, we have limited resources, everyone feels that their project is the most important. How do we actually flip and marry the strategic goals, the projects and ideas, and actually see how they interact and make plans for how things shift over time? So with that, I'm going to just stop sharing for 1 second so I can bring up the StrAlign platform. I'll share again in just a moment. Here we go. Can everyone see my screen? Confirmation?
Yep, we can see the StrAlign.
Thank you, guys. All right, so with StrAlign, it's a strategic alignment platform. And so today we're going to be focusing on the concept of project prioritization and scenario planning. And I'm excited to give you a sneak peek into something that'll be rolling out in less than 2 weeks. It's in our staging environment now, which is some extra scenario planning functionality. But let me get started with what exists today. StrAlign is available to the general public. It's available now for purchase. And Echo Consulting, which is my other company I'm a founder of, and a lot of team members here today, we do a lot of work management and project management, portfolio management implementations. StrAlign kind of sits on the front of that. And so what I mean by that is there's a couple of different key functionalities. So the first one is that you can add ideas. And when you add ideas, you can keep it super simple in the beginning. And then as an idea progresses, as it matures, you can add additional fields to that. So you have that kind of progressive elaboration. I was just on last night with about 23 different team members. About 10 of them were the executives of a larger nonprofit, and we were talking through it. And last year they used Microsoft Forms. This year they were talking about using Smartsheet, but they're using StrAlign instead. And the key reason why, the key feature that Microsoft Forms and StrAlign and Smartsheet Forms, both platforms that we use internally at Echo, the reason that they're using this is because they have the ability to use what's called progressive elaboration by creating different stages and having different fields articulated based on what phase it's in. And so what does that look like? It looks like the idea that might only have a few fields in it, but then when something moves to be an opportunity, when something progresses, it gets enough traction, or maybe someone on the senior leadership team says, hey, this needs to move up, this needs more information about it, they want a business case. They have the ability in StrAlign to say, okay, if something moves from an idea to an opportunity or to a proposal or to some other, whatever that phase is in your organization, you can add additional fields that are available to fill out. So you can basically create that business case or that board block or whatever your organization does to provide more visibility and more information to make informed decisions. Okay. One of the pieces of functionality, if you've already used StrAlign, that we've added in the last month or so, is the ability to use what we call measurement fields. Measurement fields are super powerful, and they allow you to create scenarios based on different thresholds or different kind of averages of different things. So for example, if I want to say, you know what, I'm only looking at low risk projects, or I'm only looking at projects that are under $100,000 in budget, you can do that with scenario planning. Why would you want to do that, right? What's the use case that you would want to have a bunch of ideas and then filter down and only look at ones that are low complexity, right? there's a lot of different reasons why you might be in a situation in your organization where you have all of these awesome ideas, right? We're in home, we're looking at rankings, you have all of these different wonderful ideas that you have, but something comes up. Maybe a key person on your team, leaves, or maybe you get a new resource, or maybe you have a major client that comes in and it requires you to scale. Maybe something happens like a global pandemic. There are changes that happen, and you as a leader, you as a decision maker need the ability to look across the existing projects that are already in play, the potential projects that you need to approve and resource and decide on, as well as potential ideas that might be generated because of something major that has changed in the organization. Or maybe these ideas have been on the docket for a while, but because of a change in the macroeconomic environment, because of something that's going on, either internal to your organization or external in the community, that idea now came to the top, right? It now came to the top. So let's talk a little bit about how things come to the top. So in StrAlign, there's some key functionality, right? So the first one is I'm logging in, I'm seeing, you know what, I'm making an impact, I'm logging ideas, I've completed some voting and things like that. When we're talking about StrAlign, there's a couple of different ways that you can get your team members to provide input and provide these votes. We talked about it just briefly. One is what's called a comparison. And so you can say, is this project or this project better to increase website traffic? So this would be your goal. If this was one of your goals, which one of these is better for that? And then you can look at the next one, which says, okay, which one of these is better for completing the client lifecycle? The other thing you can do is what's called rating. And rating is actually using a functionality. So the first one, comparisons, actually in scientific terms, data management terms, is called pairwise comparisons. But rating is actually what's called like a Likert scale, and it's the ability to say, how is this project going to impact all of these different goals? So instead of comparing this project versus this project, it's looking at one project and saying, what is the impact that project, that idea is going to have on those goals? So in this case, let me look at this project. I'm going to go ahead and rate it. I can see more information about this project if I want to, but you'll see in this scale that I'm saying, how is this project going to impact this goal? And maybe it doesn't have any impact, so it should just stay in the gray because there's no impact on the budget management for breaking into new markets. Maybe it's going to have a negative impact because the budget management means we're not going to have capacity or something like that for the new market. So there's lots of different ways to think about this, but this is a way of rating. So both the compare and the rating functionality have to do with how you collect data from your team about how the projects and the ideas are going to impact your goals. The goals themselves are managed by this strategic leadership team. You can have a vision. You can also put as many goals as you want in here. And now one of the functionalities that we've rolled out in the last 6 months is you can actually say, you know what, this goal is specific to this department or these departments. It doesn't apply to other departments. And that helps teams because when they go in and they do those comparisons, they're going to focus on the projects that are in their department first. They're going to focus on the goals that are in their department or in all departments first before they have any shot of looking at it. And so all of that can be configured in our settings. We won't go into that right now. But the next piece I want to talk about, right, is very much the prioritization and the scenario planning, which is really the special sauce of what makes StrAlign stand out from other work management and project management and strategic planning platforms. So what a scenario is a scenario is saying, you know what, we have all of these goals, but at different points in our organization's view, those goals might be weighted differently. So some goals might be more equal than other goals. Some goals may be more important at a given time. So in this case, you'll see this yellow one. I've called it current priorities. Oftentimes we call it the default scenario. And if I go ahead and edit this, you'll see that I'm able to edit the goals and I'm able to weight the goals differently. And so I'm going to go ahead and click the edit functionality here. And what you can see is that I have the different goals and I've weighted them in different ways. So I'm saying, you know what, right now in this example of a revenue focused scenario, I'm weighting increasing revenue really high, which makes sense, right? Because it's a revenue-focused scenario. But if I wanted to, I could create a different scenario that, say, is customer-focused. And if I create a customer-focused, maybe my focus is on improving client experience. Now, I want to see if I'm focused on client experience or customers versus revenue, how would my priorities change? And that is where scenario planning comes in, right? So in scenario planning, I can say, if I look at my revenue focused, this would be what the priorities would be, versus if I look at my customer focused, this would be what they are. So I can actually say, okay, if I'm looking at customer focused, these would be my top 3. So it would actually be a much higher situation than revenue focus, than what their current rank is. So if I was focusing on customer focus, this would be my #1 project I would want to work on. But if I'm looking at kind of how I'm currently prioritizing everything, it would be number 10. If I wanted to look at revenue focus, I would say that this project is actually the most important. Okay. So what scenario planning lets me do is it lets me look at the different priorities based on the different scenarios I have. But I want to dig into scenario planning a little bit more because it's more than just goals and we're adding a lot more functionality to this space. Let's see here. These are ranked by comparisons users have responded to. Absolutely, Maya. Comparisons and ranking. And if I can just share one additional piece, as an admin, you can actually determine what should be compared. So you could say, you know what, I'm just going to compare ideas. Maybe I don't want to do opportunities and projects. Or I only want to show rating if something's an opportunity and project. So I'm going to say, you know what, don't show ideas and rating. Additionally, you said these are ranked by comparisons users have responded to. Absolutely. But not only that, you can actually go ahead and weight different team members' votes in different ways. And so you can actually say, you know what, if someone's a team member, their vote counts as 1, but if they're a leader, they're weighted as 3, and if they're an admin, they're voted as 5. Or I could do that here. So I can actually change different user groups and or individual users to have different weighting. Additionally, I have some additional components in terms of department and managers and other things, but we'll save that for a little bit later. Let's go back to scenario planning because I think this is really, really important. You can have different scenarios, and in addition to weighting goals, you can do some other things. One thing you can do is you can create filters. And a filter is a way to say, you know what, I only want to look at how the marketing team voted this. And I want to maybe compare a different scenario where I only look at how finance would rate these goals. And I want to do some analysis to say, wow, okay, if I'm focusing on my customer facing team members and the way they voted versus I'm focusing on my finance and my legal and my compliance teams, maybe the way that they vote is different, which makes sense because they might have some different individual views and different individual input and different individual goals for their teams. So one of the ways you can create a filter is by saying, you know what, I'm going to exclude R&D votes. So when I'm creating a filter in this case, I'm basically saying these votes are included in this scenario, or these votes are not included in this scenario. Similarly, just barely we showed you as an admin that you can add a user and you can override their specific voting weighting. In a scenario, you can actually say, you know what, I want to exclude any of the admin votes so that they're not in here. Or maybe I want to include admins and I want to do a custom role. And I want to say that, you know what, the admin weight for this scenario is 10. So that admin is having a much higher weighting for these votes. And how would that change my scenario planning, and how would that look? Does that make sense to everyone, this concept of filter and the ability to kind of, narrow down either what votes are included or excluded, or change kind of some of those individual users or the role that they have weighting? Okay.
And Molly, and then these filters are considered by default when you save this and you roll out that scenario plan?
Yes. So each scenario is individual, Jason. So what that means is you create different filters for every single one of your scenarios. So you could say, you know what, I'm including finance on this one and I'm excluding them on this one. You can create as many scenarios as you want. One of the things that I like to do, Jason, is I like to actually duplicate an existing scenario. So if I duplicate this scenario, any of the information about the goals and or the filters that are in here already cover over. And then maybe I just want to change the filters and I want to say, you know what, this is actually going to be called, customer focus, right? Only client service votes, right? And so this is something I like to share just for some teams, which is you can also share the scenario or you can keep it private. So if you want to do your own private scenario where you say, wait a second, if I just did it based on my votes or my votes and my friends' votes, what would the priorities be? So you can do a lot more analysis with this. So what's amazing about this, so again, I was just on a meeting last night with a large group, the nonprofit, and what they found so useful was rather than having to do multiple rounds of voting the way they did last time in multiple meetings, you can vote and those votes can be transformed, right, with these different scenarios as many times as you need to drive the decision-making process about what the highest priorities are. Now, a common question we get is, great, this is dynamic prioritization, right? Here I see my rankings. My rankings changed based on the scenario that I've set. I can see how it's changed over time. I can even show a chart maybe and see, how priorities have shifted. I can do cool things like look at all of these and say, you know what, I only want to look at projects, for example, and see where projects are. I can also look at, what has changed maybe in the last month, for example, versus just recently. This was already set up for a month, but like maybe I could do in the last quarter, for example. But the other piece that I love about this is as an admin or as a leader, I can actually override. So there's two different things here. One is, let me get rid of my filters really quickly. So one of the pieces is that I can override the rank. So if I'm in a meeting, if I'm in a SteerCo meeting and I make the decision that this project is the highest priority, I can come over here as an admin, right, and override the rank. So the default rank, the rank based on the votes, based on your scenario, based on what you've done is 13. But I can override it and say, you know what, this is rank 1. Now, when I'm just going to, it did it on, I might have to refresh. Oh, yeah, so it just barely updated it, right? So it's, this now became number 1. Because I'm a leader, I can see that I overrode it because it's yellow. Team members won't be able to see that, but I can see that I can do that because I'm an admin. You can see that I'm an admin in this example. And so it's going to stay kind of as number 1. If I ever want to get rid of that or change that, right, I can go ahead and override this rank. And I can either switch back to the default rank or I can override it and say, you know what, now it's number 5 or something along those lines. So I do have the ability to set the priorities that the rest of the team sees. You can see that it just moved from 1 to 5. It's here. I do have the ability to set priorities. So that was one of the things that they were concerned about. The other piece I want to mention is that I have the ability to promote. So like, let's say that this idea is super important. It came up in the steering committee and it's like, I need more information on this. I can promote this right here and promote it to be an opportunity or a project. Right? I do just want to clarify a couple of things. So StrAlign is not a project management system. So it doesn't do task management. So again, we are a project management organization, and we spend a lot of time in a consulting role implementing work management and project management solutions. This is a project prioritization and a decision-making software, but we have already started to integrate with other software so that you can actually sync information back and forth between this strategic alignment, idea management, prioritization framework, and another work management software. So right now we're doing Zapier, and we should have rolled out for Microsoft as well in the next month or so. But you can basically get into Zapier and say, you know what, I want to push things from StrAlign into Smartsheet, into Monday, into Airtable, into whatever system you want to. Or I want, when something changes in Smartsheet, to push back into StrAlign so that I can sync information so that I don't have to have two different systems of record. The focus of StrAlign right now really is this strategic planning component. Okay. Now, do you guys have like 3 minutes for a sneak peek into some of the scenario planning stuff that's coming out in the next couple of weeks? I think we have enough time. All right, so right now I'm in StrAlign. I'm on the actual live app that clients can use. I'm going into our staging environment for a quick sneak peek, and I'm still in the scenarios page, but I want to show you guys a couple of new features that are coming to scenario planning because we're really excited to share them. So in the current in this piece, we have some new filter capabilities. So in addition to what I already showed you in terms of being able to use the votes for, departments, user role, so same functionality I just shared with you, you now are going to have the ability to filter out which ideas, which components are included in the scenario. So I'm able to say, for example, I only want to look at things that are, for example, project. I can also include information like, you know what, I want to include budget, and I don't want to include anything that is, so I want to say is less than or equal to $100,000, for example, or $10,000 in terms of cost. And I'm going to put a threshold because my budget for these projects is $100,000 for all of the different projects. So let me see what projects based on the priority would fit within my $100,000 threshold. And so I can also include blanks or not. So when you add new fields, maybe the fields aren't filled out. So for right now, I'm definitely trying to advise clients will include blanks to get started, but eventually you'll go ahead and exclude blanks. So the only things that have data are included in this. And that's where the measurement fields that I briefly touched on earlier become super powerful. Because for things like complexity or priority or risk, you can use a Likert scale, a scale, and say, you know what, I only want to look at projects that are, for example, greater than low. Or greater than medium, or I only want to look at ones that are higher than a certain threshold. I can also say I only want to look at complexity projects that are less than medium, right? And we've already started to talk with some clients that are looking to use this for return on investment to say, okay, is the return on investment expected in 1 month, 3 months, 12 months? Like, what does that look like? So let me just take you back a moment. And so again, this is new functionality. It's in staging right now. It's being tested. But this should be going out in the next couple of weeks. So we're really excited. It's ahead of the annual planning, budgeting season and things like that is coming up. And we're super pumped because one of the key use cases that we're seeing with people is definitely that annual planning, strategic planning, using that to kick off, using StrAlign, and then moving it into day-to-day operations over the course of the time. So just one more moment with the measurement fields, and I'll switch back to slides and wrap us up and make sure we have time for questions. So a measurement field is something that you'll be able to include in your scenario planning for threshold planning. So what that means is I can add a scale, and I can say, you know what, I want to say, you know what I mean? What would be something that would have a scale? Users impact, user impact, right? Day-to-day impact, right? I can add some information on this. I'll just kind of copy and paste it because I'm just testing it right now, right? And I can say negative to positive or positive to negative. And so right now, negative for user day-to-day impact would be very high, right? So if I wanted to say user impact, you know, the negative means it's like a very high, or I could switch it back and forth and say positive, and I can update what these are here as well. But what you want to be able to do is understand like which one is the one that you want, which should be positive, and which one's the one that you don't want. So as you're framing this up, it's important that you're creating the scale in a way that makes sense so that when we say is greater than or is less than in the thresholds, you can actually use the scale concept. Does that make sense to everyone? The more familiar one that most people are probably used to is the concept of adding a numeric threshold. And so for this one, you can definitely do budget. But for example, you could actually break this out into kind of licensing or operational budget versus one-time investment budget. So you could add, you know what I mean, licensing, ongoing costs or something like that. And then you could use currency or you could use numbers. So you could say number of users, number of months, number of anything. And you could say what it is. So maybe 0 to, I don't know, high end 100,000, just giving you an example, or 10,000, right? And so you can save that. Oh, looks like I have to copy and paste this in here. So save. And so that now this licensing and ongoing costs can be added into whichever stage you want this added into. You can add the measurement field into here. So see that licensing and ongoing cost one we just created, you can just drag and drop and say, you know what, we want to see this information starting here. And then when people are updating their individual item, they can go ahead and say what that looks like. Does that make sense to everyone? All right. I'm going to pause. I'm going to go back to slides for just 1 second. Let me just stop sharing for 1 second while I switch over. And then we will do one more slide, and then I will open it up for questions or recommendations or anything like that. So let me share my screen one more time, everyone. Sorry about the transition. All right. And of course, I'm not showing the right one, so that's why. Oh, it's over here. Sorry. From current slide. All right, so next steps, a couple of different things here. So StrAlign is generally available. There's a free trial. If you are interested in strategic alignment, you're interested in StrAlign and what it can do for your team, definitely sign up for a meeting with me. We'll follow up on this webinar to discuss tailoring StrAlign to meet your workflow and to kind of talk about your specific challenges that your organization has and how you might configure StrAlign. Additionally, we offer strategic planning and prioritization workshops, both on site and online. So if you're looking ahead at either a strategic planning or annual planning exercise or budgeting exercise, and you're looking for support, please don't hesitate to reach out. We can definitely support you in that. We're also looking for partners for other management consulting organizations, other people that are helping teams with strategic alignment and planning, having access to StrAlign to be able to get that information and kind of keep that strategic alignment going. Additionally, we're still a relatively new software and team, so any feedback on StrAlign and or on the presentation today is hugely valuable. So I will be sending up a follow-up email. It'll have a link to set up a meeting with me if you're interested. It'll also have a link to the recording of this webinar, as well as a couple other things, including feedback for both the presentation today as well as StrAlign and what you saw and what questions you have about that. Okay. So with that being said, we have about 5 minutes left. Does anyone have an initial question? Is there anything that anyone wants to go back through And or does anyone want to share an example of something that they're struggling with to see if StrAlign might be able to help with that?
Molly, I noticed a while back there you were forced to put some information in the description field, which I wholeheartedly buy into. Like you can't submit unless you tell me what it is a little bit. Going forward, like using your budget example with the scale. So if there were a scenario and somebody's submitting an idea, and those budgetary numbers are critical to me, help like understanding where that's going to sit in the hierarchy of projects. Can I make that sliding scale mandatory in certain scenarios as well?
Absolutely. So you can actually make any field required. What happens, Jason, is that when something moves from an idea to an opportunity, or I think last night they were talking about proposal or something else, oftentimes organizations unlock additional fields. And so what can happen is that when you go to update that, absolutely, you can require fields. But when something moves from one stage into another stage, new fields get unlocked, and sometimes those are those required fields. So what you do get is you get a notification as the owner of that idea or a contributor to that idea or a manager of a contributor of that idea that new fields have been unlocked. And that's in your notifications in your profile. I think you can also get emails, but you'll definitely have that in your notifications. As soon as you make any edits on the additional information of that idea, you will be required to fill that out. But in the short term, when it first becomes an idea to an opportunity or goes up in whatever those stages are that organization needs, we have to wait until we get that information. And that's really where we're struggling with, like, we want to make sure that we're including blanks, but it's definitely on our backlog to say, like, okay, you can include blanks for up to a week or something like that. But then if they still haven't updated it, then they're not part of the scenario. And then we anticipate similarly in the scenario planning to give more functionality to our leaders, which say, you know what, not just include blanks or don't include blanks, but actually, saying, include something has been updated in a certain period of time, or include, there's other things as well. So you can actually say it has to have all these fields. So not quite there. Sorry, I went a little bit deep on you, but yes, you have the ability to determine what fields are required and what are not. The issue comes is when you move from one phase to another. Until that person edits that, it can remain blank.
Makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions? All right, well, I will send that email out. If not today, then tomorrow. My name is Molly Yanis. Thank you for spending time with us today to talk about project prioritization and strategic alignment. If you are looking for support, either from a consulting side of things or a tool to manage your strategic alignment, please don't hesitate to reach out. I will include a meeting link as well as my email in the follow-up, so don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. Thank you for your time today, everyone.